Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to continue our introduction to AWS, this time talking specifically about EC2. Again, I want to reiterate that here we are providing a high-level introduction to Amazon Web Services using oversimplification of concepts for the purpose of providing a frame of reference for you to move forward. So if you have not watched any of the previous videos, I just want to make this point very clear in that the concepts that I'm sharing and the way that I'm talking about these AWS resources is in a very oversimplified fashion. And this is only to provide a frame of reference and a general understanding of these concepts so that as you take more advanced courses, it will be easier for you to absorb and understand the more technical aspects related to these items. So, as promised in the previous video, here we're going to dive into Netflix and understand how Netflix uses AWS resources such as EC2, RDS, and Amazon S3 to power their website. Now, I'm using Netflix because it is probably one of the most well-known websites in the world, and I assume that most of you either have a Netflix account, use Netflix on a regular basis, or at least somewhat aware of what Netflix is. But if you aren't, just understand that Netflix is probably right now the world's #1 provider of video content, streaming video content, and they are AWS's #1 customer or user of cloud resources. Now, specifically how Netflix utilizes and uses AWS, again, this is a drastic oversimplification of how Netflix actually uses AWS. They use a lot more than just these three services. So as mentioned earlier, in this particular video, we're going to talk specifically about Amazon EC2. So right now, let's just get rid of those other two and focus specifically on Amazon EC2 and what EC2 is. So Amazon EC2 is short for Elastic Cloud Compute, but don't worry about remembering that right now. All you need to know is conceptually what EC2 is and what it does. So when you talk about EC2, what I want you to do is just think about a basic computer. That's basically what EC2 is. It's the virtual equivalent of the computer that is currently sitting in front of you. Again, that is a drastic oversimplification, but in terms of the concept, that's essentially what it is. So what does a basic computer have, right? It has a CPU for processing power, an operating system, in AWS's case, either Linux or Windows. It has a hard drive or local storage, a network card, how it can access the internet. It has a firewall for security, and RAM to access and run programs. However, in terms of AWS, I don't want you to actually think about a base computer. I want you to think about a server computer, because generally AWS is used by enterprise companies, and generally they're using these computers or this compute power as servers. So now I want to introduce another piece of cloud terminology called instance. So a lot of times in AWS, an EC2 server will be referred to as an EC2 instance. So you will hear terms like provision an EC2 instance or spin up an EC2 instance. So if you hear instance, just think server. When you hear instance or server, just think EC2. And if that is still a little unclear to you, you can always just think about EC2 as a basic computer, right? It just has these components, and then you can do with it whatever you would like. So now, how does Netflix specifically use EC2? So when you go to www.netflix.com, you come to their homepage and you would see something that looks exactly like this. So in essence, what the Amazon EC2 instance is doing is it's acting as a server or a web hosting server. So when you go to www.netflix.com as a user, so you're here, you have an internet connection, you go to www.netflix.com, you are in essence connecting to an Amazon EC2 instance, which is currently serving as a web hosting server. And that EC2 instance contains all the files and the code to give you this page. So that is one of the main features and functions of an Amazon EC2 instance in the world of Netflix, or in most of the internet as a whole, is it acts as a web hosting server. It contains all of the files and code needed to display a web page to any particular user that visits their site. Okay, so again, let's quickly recap. I want you to think of EC2 as a virtual computer that you can use for whatever you like. One of the common uses of that is as a web hosting server. Also, we introduced the cloud term instance, which is another way of referring to an EC2 server. So what's next? Next, we're going to talk about what happens when you actually go to sign in and put your credentials into Netflix.com. So with that, we will conclude this video. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.